Okay, so this is our class recording, and let's take a look at the second part of this handout that I had. We did the first part in the last recording, but in this re- in this part, I want to focus on Samson, and this is maybe me being me. I don't know if Samson is deserves all of this attention, but I'm going to give Samson some attention today before we move on to the uh, historical books of the Bible and King David and those sorts of things. Um, Samson was given great strength and was a judge of Israel for over 20 years, according to the Bible. At one point in Judges, Samson kills 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone. Now, this would be not a live donkey. This would be a donkey, I guess, who was had decomposed, but he pulls the bone out and kills 1,000 Philistines. You probably are getting the point now. This type of story is good, what we call fodder material for manga. Samson's stories are great. If you're an artist, we're going to look at some art later. If you're a manga artist, I'm certain Samson has been portrayed somewhere in manga. I haven't found it, but these are what we call over the top stories about Samson's size and his strength and also his wit. He's a funny guy, and he's supposed to be kind of smart, but you kind of get the idea that ultimately he's not so smart. Anyway, he falls in love with Delilah tragically, who eventually she nags him into revealing the secret of his strength. Why are you so strong? His uncut hair. All right. So he was a Nazarite, and in that sect or that group of people, they did not cut their hair. And there's a long story to that. But basically, he's part of a religious group that doesn't cut their hair. And there's a sense that that's where their strength comes from. She tells Samson's secret to ever menacing Philistines. Philistines. Now, Philistines become more and more important. And I want you to know this word. Let me bring this up a bit. Ever menacing Philistines. There's a group of people around them who are called the Philistines. And it's okay to kill them. You just kill them like you would kill mosquitoes or something, but they're a lot bigger and a lot stronger than mosquitoes. But that's the menacing group in this part of the Bible, and Samson is extremely good at killing them, and that's all very happy if you want to take the point of view of the Bible. Now the Philistines finally they cut Samson's hair, then blind him. His hair grows back, his strength returns, and during a challenge he pulls down the pillars or pushes them. We're not sure, but he destroys the pillars supporting a temple, killing many uh, Philistines. Many Philistines. All right, so Samson becomes a judge of Israel. Samson becomes a judge of Israel, and he hooks up with. He's a virile man. He has apparently, a lot of women, but he hooks up with Delilah, who was his lover. They had a romantic love affair that ended badly. All right, so let's go to the book of Samson and look at this. These are areas in the world that we hear about now. Gaza. That's Samson went to Gaza and saw there a harlot and went in unto her. Now that means what you might think it means in the Bible. When yes, it means that a harlot is a woman who is either very loose or she sells her body, and he has a woman. Samson's just this kind of guy, and the Gazites uh, compassed him. They surrounded him and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city. So they're behind the gate of the city, laying wait and threatening him in some way. This is not very clear about how they were positioned with him, but they were quiet. In the morning, they're going to get him and they're going to kill him. This is almost like a camp campfire story that you would tell uh, teenagers or younger children. It's not such a good story for younger children. Samson lay till midnight and arose at midnight and took all the doors to the gate of the city, just yanked the doors off and the two posts, and he went with them, bar and all, and put them all on his shoulder. He's carrying these huge gates. That's how big Samson is. Carried them up to the top of a hill that is before Hebron. So there you go with your city. You think you can wait and attack me and kill me? No, I'll steal the gates of your city. So I'm sorry, Hamlet. Why did I say Hamlet? Samson, Hamlet would be the absolute reverse of Samson, the opposite. Samson has done a lot of things by the time we get to this book. He has killed a lion. We'll see the picture. He's tied foxes' tails together and put them on fire and put them through to a village. He's done all of this stuff. He's had a riddle. He shows that he has a little bit of a mind, even though I think in the end he's a little bit stupid, telling Delilah anything. But it came to pass, it happened afterwards, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, and her name was Delilah. And so where the valley of Sorek is, where it's hard to tell, but he falls in love with the woman. And the lords of the Philistines, the Philistine warriors, their top men, came to her, and she seems to be, either side. And she said, entice him, ask him where his great strength lieth. Now, by this time, Samson was already known as a killer of Philistines. And any Philistine out there, that would be a great prize if you could get Samson, right? A very big prize. He had killed many of your fellow people, and they want to find out where his strength is, where it lieth, where it is, where it rests, so they can surprise attack him, right? They can't do it uh, while he has his strength, but if they take away his strength, they seem to know something about this, that his strength comes from somewhere. So, what means they may prevail against him, how they can attack him, and may bind him to afflict him, bind him, tie him up, and torture him, afflict, torture. And we'll give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. We'll pay you a lot of money. So Delilah doesn't hesitate. She goes to Samson. Tell me, I pray thee, I ask you, where thy strength lieth, and wherewith thou might be bound to afflict thee. How are you? How are you made weak? Okay. Where is your strength, and how can you be made weak? Samson, being sort of clever, says, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, withs would be claws that were not dry, right? Wet claws, then I shall be weak. And the Philistines brought to her 7 green withs that had not been dried, and she bound them. And there were men lying in wait. There are always these Philistines somewhere around the chamber. They're just lurking around waiting. And she said unto him, the Philistine, be upon thee, Samson. And he breaks out of these. She ties him up. This is such a cartoon. And I love it. She ties him up in these green claws, and he just breaks out of them. And let's see. Uh, yeah, he breaks the whiz as a thread of tow is broken when it touches the fire. Is so quick to whack, and his strength was not known. And so I don't know what happened to the Philistines. They apparently backed off when they saw him. Delilah is angry with him. She said, you have mocked me. You've made fun of me and told me lies. Tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou might be bound. How can you be taken and bound? What makes you weak? He said, if they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, new ropes that had never been used, I'll be weak. So she binds him with the ropes. The Philippines are upon you, Samson, now. And there were liars in waiting about the chamber. They were waiting to jump in, and he break from him off his arms like a thread, so that I guess they run away. So Samson hadn't figured out yet that Delilah is setting him up? I don't know. But Delilah says to Samson, "You have made fun of me and told me lies. And so 7 locks of my head with the web." She fastened it with the pin. Well, the same thing happens. And finally, she says, "Well, listen, how can I say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me 3 times, and that he have not told me where your great strength is." She pressed him daily, nagging, nagging. That word is nagging is the same word you could use if you had a parents who wanted you to do your homework and did not let up when you said, "No, I don't want to do it," and kept nagging you and saying, "Do your homework, do your homework, do your homework." That's nagging. Um, so finally, he's nagged enough, and he um, he gives in. He gives in. So he says, "There has not come a razor upon mine head. I am a Nazareth unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then all my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak like any other man." And when Delilah saw that he had told all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, "Come up this once. He has shown me all of his heart." And they came up, and they brought money in their hand, and she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man and caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and strength went from him. Now, what she did to afflict him, I'm not sure. She said, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." And he awoke out of his sleep and said, "I will go out as is other times before and shake myself." But he knew not, he wished not that the Lord departed from him. The strength comes from his hair, but the strength comes from God. And when they take his hair, they take God from him. So he doesn't have his strength. So the Philistines could take him. They took him and they put out his eyes. They blinded him. They brought him down to Gaza and bound him with fetters of brass. They put him in chains and brass and did grind in the prison house, put him in prison. But the Philistines, not being very smart either, they forget that his hair keeps growing, and his hair began to grow again. And so the Philistines gathered themselves together to offer a great sacrifice, to offer something back to Dagon, their god, the Philistine god. There are other gods mentioned for other tribes in the Bible, but the god that the Philistines worshipped was Dagon. Dagon is their god. And they are going to rejoice and do Rehai and celebrate Dagon, for our God hath delivered Samson, our enemy, to our hand. We have been given Samson, and he no longer threatens us. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, "Our God has delivered unto our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our country, many, which killed many of us." And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, that they said, "Call for Samson, that he might make us sport." And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport. He's blind, he's weak, they think, and they make him do things, and they play around with him, probably abuse him. Sport could have been a lot of abusive stuff, probably, right? That's what you might imagine. And they set him between the pillars. Now, the pillars are the columns of this big uh, temple that they had. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, there's some boy leading him around, "Suffer me, let me know that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I might lean upon him. Show me where the pillars are so I can lean. I'm tired." And the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women. Well, that tells you how big the place was. The roof of the place you could stand on, and this would be you know, stone type place where, you know, the roof holding 3,000 people. So a big place that beheld Samson made sport. They were watching from there. And Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me. I pray thee, strengthen me. I pray thee only this once, O God, that I might be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. I want revenge for my two eyes. Give me strength, O God. And Samson took hold of the two middle pillars upon which the house stood, on which it was borne up, the one with his right hand, and the one with his and of the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bowed himself with all of his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all that were with therein. So the dead which he slew, killed at his death, were more than he killed in his life. Wow, he took out a lot of Philistines. Well, if you're on the side of the Bible, that's yay, Samson. A happy story. So then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Estaol, the burying place of Manoah, his father. And he judged Israel 20 years. So that's the end of that story. So I wanted to give you an idea of some of the art that this is inspired. This is Lucas Cranach, and this is Samson killing the lion, and the story of Samson with the lion. Uh, and this is another story from from the story, another scene from the story that I'm not going to ask you to remember, and the sacrifice of Manoah. And Samson slays 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. There you are. There's a good image for you, artist. Look at that. Samson and Delilah. You can read the names of the artists down here. Samson and Delilah. That's just wonderful. Hundreds, centuries later, this story inspired artists because you see the raw material of the story doesn't give us a lot. So you can just do what you want. And this is the destruction of the temple according to the biblical narrative. And so there's an image where an artist tries to depict that. And here again, the image. Samson blind. This is wonderful. Yeah, much more postmodern kind of look there. um, Samson doing the treadmill, another story. Again, Samson with the lion. So Samson has been just completely something that has what has harnessed the creative skills of many artists, sculptors you see there, and so that's the story. All right, so let's move along here from the story of Samson. There's also I wanted to say in Judges as evidence that people also fought among themselves, right? These tribes of people fought among themselves within the Israelites. It wasn't all peace and harmony and just them going out and killing Philistines, according to the Bible. There is the story of a horrible deed committed by some men of the member of Benjamin against a wife of a Levite. The leads to this leads to the other 11 tribes of Israel virtually eliminating the tribe of Benjamin, a major tribe, over that one thing. So one act could lead to an enormous amount of violence. Okay, so next we have the short, very short book of Ruth. And Ruth is Naomi's daughter in law. After her husband's death, Ruth remained faithful to her husband's family. She retained a deep devotion to her mother in law. Now, Ruth eventually married Boaz and had a son named Obed, who had Jesse, who was the father of the famous King David. She is remembered as one who is loyal to her marital family and their family name. Her story also shows the link from Jesse to David. All right, now let me explain that a bit. She's important because she links things. When we start again next week, we're going to talk about the link from King David to down from King David in the Christian tradition to Christ, Jesus Christ. And it's also important that King David is linked to the fathers, the old fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Moses, all of the fathers of the lineage there. And so this little book is put into the Bible to link the lineage of the Hebrew race to King David. That's the link through Naomi, but then through Jesse. And uh, the story itself is an example of a wife who stays loyal to her husband's family even after he dies. And I think this is important too, because you need this in order to assure the lineage of people. And also, it's an example, again, like Deborah, of a strong woman in the Bible. And it's a charming, charming story about how Ruth manages. Eventually, she manages to marry Boaz, and they have this little relationship where they sleep apart, but kind of she gets closer, and they fall together. And then Jesse comes up, and Jesse's going to be important as the father of David in the next uh, recording that we do. All right, so that is all for this section of the Bible, and that's all for our class recording today.